Emerging Leaders Council is a diverse collective of early to mid-career business events professionals who identify as future leaders within our industry. Our purpose is to support and develop the next generation of leaders through education, events, and community right across Australia. Our members represent a broad mix of industry sectors, roles, interests, and locations, which is something we're incredibly proud of. You might be wondering what we mean by an emerging leader. Within the ABIA context, this refers to individuals who are either aged 35 or under and or have less than 10 years experience in the business events industry and who are recognised by themselves or others as future leaders. Today's audience reflects that diversity. We're joined by emerging leaders who are ABIA members and non-members, as well as supporters, managers, and organisations who are committed to fostering and investing in emerging talent. This session is designed to support that developmental journey. Before we move into today's discussion, I'd like to briefly hand over to Amanda Fraser, who will provide a short address and update on behalf of ABIA.
Thanks, Georgia. There is plenty happening across ABIA at the moment, with a number of events, initiatives, and member activities currently in planning and delivery. We have social connects, roundtables, 2 of the popular Leading Well courses registered for August and December, and a reminder that Peer Exchange, our ABIA mentoring program, is open to all employees of our member organisations. If you're not a member or unsure, I'll be sending an email with the recording and survey after this session, so please reach out. Advocacy remains a key point for ABIA, and we'll continue to keep members updated on the work being done to support and strengthen our industry. We're also pleased to see a strong engagement across all of our councils, including today's webinar, which is led by the Emerging Leaders Council, who continue to do a fantastic job creating opportunities for connection, learning, and professional growth across our industry. The Council plays an important role in bringing fresh ideas, energy, and perspective to ABIA, and today's session is a great example of that action. I'm pleased to hand over to our Emerging Leaders Council, who will take you through today's webinar. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy the session.
Amazing. Thanks, Amanda. I'll now run through just a few housekeeping items for today's session. We'll be facilitating a Q&A throughout the panel discussion, and we've also set aside some time at the end to take questions from the audience. Please keep your microphone on mute unless you're speaking. When we open the floor for audience questions, you're welcome to raise your hand and we'll come to you so you can ask your question directly. Alternatively, feel free to pop your questions into the chat, and our Emerging Leaders Council members will be monitoring this and can raise them on your behalf. Now, moving into today's discussion, leading without the title, positioning yourself for future leadership opportunities. I'm really delighted to introduce our panel. Firstly, we have John Gorton, co-founder of Turnkey Event Solutions and TES Recruitment. John is an accomplished people-first leader and strategic advisor within the event sector, with more than 18 years experience across the event sector before then moving into event recruitment, business growth, leadership, and commercial execution. Through his work, he is deeply committed to supporting the next generation of event leaders and tailored recruitment advisory and leadership developmental solutions. Joining John is Tiani Pearden, Senior Account Manager at Morton Hire. With over 7 years experience across the business, events, and exhibitions industry, Tiani has progressed from account coordinator through to senior responsibilities by consistently leading through action, building trust, credibility, and strong client outcomes well before holding a formal leadership title. She brings a practical and relatable perspective on how emerging professionals can step up and position themselves for future leadership opportunities. And finally, we're joined by Scott Schaefer, General Manager of Crowne Plaza Hobart. Scott is an accomplished international hotelier with more than 20 years experience across 4 countries and multiple regions. His background spans hotel openings, refurbishments, and major capital projects, as well as time with IHG's head office leading operations support and franchise initiatives across Australasia and Japan. And, hot off the press, Scott was recently awarded Australasian General Manager of the Year for IHG. It's fantastic to have such a diverse mix of perspectives across recruitment, supplier, and venue leadership represented here today. So to kick things off, I'd love to open with a brief question for all three of our panelists. We're talking about leadership without the title, but in practice, what does that actually look like? And how does that differ, if at all, from what we traditionally think as management? John, would you like to start us off?
Yes, certainly, and what a pleasure to be on this fantastic webinar with such a great title and with such great participants. So from my side, leadership isn't about what we would think managing people, even managing projects. It's really about owning outcomes before you're asked to. What I find is that a leader would be demonstrating the behaviors of a leader well before, maybe 6 months, 12 months before any promotion might happen. So it's something that is a behavioral factor that's within our control. I know those of you who've been on the ABIA Emerging Leaders will already have heard this, but one of the absolute fundamentals as a first step is that leading yourself. Do we show up every day consistently? Do we make our deadlines? Do we deliver? Do we get back to our customers as we promised? Do we produce the work for our colleagues that we promised? All those things are within our individual control. So the first step from my side is that leading yourself. And that is the first step towards being a leader in the events industry.
Great. Tiani, I might come to you next.
Yeah. I really want to, I guess, tag on to what John has said there. A lot of this I had. Sorry. So I think for myself, I think it is a lot like John said, it's more the behavior. So I think that's how it differs from traditional management, which may be kind of leading with a formal authority. But if you're actually, just being a leader, you can do that, I think, without actually having any formal authority over people. And that's, I think, a lot of through your behavior and expertise. So you're really just taking a bit of influence and control and inspiring people rather than giving directions to like a subordinate.
Yeah, completely agree. Scott, I might come to you. I'd love to hear it from a little bit more of like a hotel leadership perspective.
Yeah, certainly. I think the one common thread in hospitality businesses and hotels in particular is largely we have the four same stakeholders. We have our customer, our team, the organisation, and our communities. And I find when I see an individual, even before they're a leader, showing care and ownership over any or all of those stakeholders, in particular their team, I always find that quite powerful. Look, I'll give you an example. We about 12 months ago at Crown Plaza Hobart had a bit of turnover in operations. We had a young, very new supervisory level team member that had to leave the business because of visa restrictions, had to head home for a while. And I was new to the business, and I still remember this person in particular sought me out, and they were so invested in ensuring that certain things were passed over so things didn't fall through the cracks, and that everything ran smoothly. And at that stage, I thought to myself, this person doesn't owe us anything, but he is literally so invested in ensuring things remained stable. And when that visa was resolved and he was able to come back, he called us up and said, would you, I'd really love to come back. And we were like, yes, please. We want people like this in our organisation. And fast forward 8 months later, he's a manager and was our employee of the year for 2025. So yeah, ownership and care of stakeholders and something bigger than themselves, I find, is really important.
Completely agree. Love that. And moving on to the next load of questions, let's stay in that space of before the title, when you're not formally leading yet, but when you're starting to be seen that way. Scott, this one's for you again. From a senior leadership perspective, what behaviors make you notice someone as a future leader before they hold the title? And I think you've just touched on that, but which a great example, and I completely agree as well. That kind of due diligence, that care beyond like just doing your role and what you're paid to do on a day to day. But are there any other key characteristics or
Yeah.
behaviors that make you know
Sorry. Curiosity.
someone
When
is a
people
future leader?
who are there. I want to keep going. So absolutely curiosity. I love when people ask questions and want to understand the impact that their role has. As a frontline team member, it's amazing how impactful they can be before they actually become a leader. They impact the most important stakeholder of the lot, customers. And I love when junior team members start to thread that together. What is the impact? If I deliver A, how does that become B? And then the flow and effect of results. And when I see curiosity and an eagerness to understand how their seemingly small role at the start has a big impact at the end, I always find that extremely impressive.
Yeah, fantastic. Curiosity. Love that. John, how about you? When you're
Yeah.
placing candidates, what signals that someone is already thinking and operating beyond their current role?
Well, very similar to Scott, but from a different lens. If I'm talking to candidates, it's a real signal when people are able to illustrate and recognize how their work, their role impacts the wider business. And people, at whatever level, if you can talk about outcomes of the work you did, not just the tasks you executed, it really does show positioning that you're on the way to being a leader. So, talking about revenue, whether it's client retention, whether it's a particular case study of an exhibitor or a customer you helped, it shows that you're a problem solver, that you're aware of the impact of your work. I think that's the real key there, not just going through the motions of executing your tasks, however well, but what those tasks deliver for your business, for your customer. That's, and I do see a lot of high talent around, and that's something that we could really learn from, is to demonstrate that impact.
Perfect. Thank you. Completely agree and love that perspective. Tiani, I'll come to you next. Looking back on your relatively short journey, I must say, looking back, what were you doing before you had the title that you feel helped position you for that leadership role? And was there a moment where you realized you were already operating like a leader before you had that formal title?
Yeah, I'll answer the second part first. So I think the moment I kind of realized I was already operating like a leader was when, rather than going to my manager or someone more senior and saying, I've got this problem and how do I fix it? I was more going to them and say, this happened and this is what I've done to correct it. So just being a bit more of a proactive problem solver within the business. Which I think is a big part of being a leader. If you see something that you think we could do this better, or is this actually the best way to do this, rather than sitting back, taking that more proactive approach to say, I think this is what we should do. So some things that I did that wasn't anything really major. Just one small example I thought of, we have like a general inquiries inbox where all our website traffic filters through to. And it was my manager's job to go through that and allocate work from that each day. And they're busy managing everyone, and they would struggle to do it. And it would always be a bit of an afterthought. So I said, hey, I can run that inbox if you don't have time to get to it. Really took that on and made that my thing that I did for the business. And I had a good example. Someone in my team recently did a similar thing for myself. We had a new starter coming on, Our training manual probably needed a bit of a revamp. And without my knowledge, she just kind of came back to me and said, "Hey, for next week, I've set up this training schedule and I've redone the manual if you want to have a look at it," which just I thought showed such good leadership that she just took that on without being asked and did it. And I guess if you are somebody that feels like there's things that you want to do, but you maybe not able just to say, "I've taken this on and done it," my advice would just be maybe go to your manager and say, "I've noticed this is an issue, and here's 2 ways I think we could potentially make this a non-issue." You're not really overstepping them, you're still respecting their authority, but I think it's showing them that you're looking at the bigger picture of the business and not just what you have on your plate from day to day.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice, and it's things that I've definitely heard several times over in terms of, especially because we're always working in such busy, fast-paced environments in this industry, is like if you can go to a manager or someone with problem but also some solutions, like they're just it's much better received, but also in terms of like just being able to take that off, not add to the plate. So I think managers, like, just because we're in such fast-paced industries, like managers, as you said, like your manager was struggling to get through, like, the ad hoc jobs that were part of their to-do list, like having that capacity of like someone who can just be like, "Hey, this has come up, but I've already thought about how we can fix it, and it's something that I'm willing to take on," is just like it's almost like a like moment, like type of thing, because you want like staff that can feel approachable coming to you, but also that they can take that initiative and proactive step. I love that. So we're going to move on a little bit more to visibility. And so if leadership starts with that before the title, visibility and credibility becomes really important, especially when you don't have that formal authority, like we were saying. So what does being visible look like when you don't have a title yet? And how do you do that authentically? So Tiani, I might come to you again on that, because I know we just spoke about that, not overstepping, staying kind of within your bounds still, but showing that proactive initiative.
Mhm.
Do you have any tips on how you can do that authentically without, it coming across to your superior that you're trying to step on their toes?
I think the best way to do something like that authentically is just to kind of go and start doing it in the background. So don't do it expecting or wanting like a big pat on the back straight away or well done. Just you're really wanting to do it to obviously help yourself in the business, but to help the business as a whole. So it could be, a range of things that you could put your hand up to do, I think, to increase your visibility. And the more you do, I think that just starts to really create a good foundation of like trust and influence with the team and yourself, which I think you have to have trust if you're going to be a leader in a business. And I think the more of those things you do, the bigger your visibility will get. But it could be a long road. I'd just say just tick away doing them without really expecting too much back, probably initially.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. And, one mantra that I definitely try and live by is, don't ask someone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. So as simple things as like, out working in a team environment, if you can see that the kitchen just needs a little wipe up or something, like, just taking that on yourself, you're like, "Oh, I got a spare 5 minutes." Just those little things I think can go really far in terms of being like a team player and just showing that you're not just in it for you. So really good tips, definitely. So John, I might come to you next. Do you see people underselling themselves at this stage, and how can they better communicate their value again without kind of like overstepping that boundary?
Yeah, I think I do see people underselling themselves. Sometimes that's a nice quality because they're modest or they're humble or that they want to be a team player. When you're looking for to demonstrate your own values, you should be using the word "I," not "we," in a nice, polite, still modest way. But the important thing with that is to really recognize what your role delivers, and not just your role, but yourself delivers in terms of outcomes. So we do tend to talk about we, and we do tend to talk about my show does this, or my team does this, and that's all may be true, but underselling yourself comes out of that. So I say sometimes be a little bit sort of selfish about this, and promote what you do, but promote it in a very factual, specific outcomes that your work has delivered, and don't underestimate whatever the level of your role in your sort of company hierarchy. Each task you delivers an outcome that contributes to the business as a whole. So don't underestimate that. And one tip for the top: don't ever say I'm only a something. You're not only anything. You are. Every role in a business is really an important part of the way the whole thing can succeed together.
Yeah, great. Love that. And I think you're so right. Like when it comes to a business, big or small, like everything is important, and there are these roles there for a specific reason. So it's important to remember that, your role is valuable. Otherwise it wouldn't exist. So yeah, I think that's a great perspective. Scott, I might come to you next. What builds credibility fastest for someone who isn't yet in that leadership role, but wants to be seen as ready for that next step?
Yeah, look, I think consistency goes a long way. And, going back to what John just said, I think once someone's built credibility as a team member, as an assistant, as a 2IC, that gives them a lot of power to ultimately articulate exactly what they want. And generally speaking, I think once someone's built that credibility, leaders want to know. They're like, this person's a superstar. They're a solid contributor to our business. We want to know what they want now. And generally speaking, I think if someone is, telling everyone loudly and proudly what they want before they've built a level of credibility within the business, and delivering for those stakeholders I mentioned previously, that's the only time it gets a little bit jarring. But as I said, once someone's built a credibility through consistency, through delivery, that's when leaders want to know, and they want to deliver, and they want to deliver an outcome for that person, and they listen intently, and they're like, I see something in this person. I want to help them to develop. Because most genuine leaders really, really appreciate that and enjoy it. So I think it's consistency of delivery, putting those stakeholders first, and then that puts you in a really powerful position to loudly and proudly articulate exactly what you want. And most of the time, people will listen.
Yeah, love that. And I think that we've all been in situations where, using another metaphor, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And, sometimes it is hard, I guess, if you're someone who just like cracks on and gets on to build that credibility and seeing that happen, to be like, what about me? Or should I just be more vocal? But I think you're right. I completely agree. Getting that credibility, putting the hard work into practice, and kind of practicing what you preach, and then showing that you are someone who does the work or isn't in it just for them, or, you are in it for the long haul, can go a long way in terms of then, being able to talk about where you see yourself, or what opportunities might be valuable for you, but you've already shown that you're someone who is a hard worker and willing to put the work in as well. So, looking as we move into career progression and that stepping up time, I personally, I started at Business Events Perth around 4 years ago, and started as a business development manager. And I am definitely at that stage of my career where I'm hungry. I'm hungry for those opportunities and that next step. And it is hard to kind of like, not be the person who's like me, want, but also, there are specific opportunities or responsibilities or things that might be really useful for my personal development, and that I'm willing to just kind of sink my teeth into. So it's a little bit hard to kind of strike that balance, between, just being someone who focuses on what they need to do and putting their head down and getting the work done, but also that standing up for yourself and not underselling yourself as well. And especially when you're working in a hierarchical business where there are, different levels of the role that you're working in, like a coordinator, a manager, senior manager, and kind of holding to your steadfast of, this is the role of a manager. And yes, I see myself as a senior manager and I want to start working in that way, but also not underselling yourself and ensuring that you are, if you're going to be working as a senior manager and on par with other senior managers, that you are also going to be seen and perhaps have that title as well as a senior manager. So for me, I was then promoted to a senior manager of business development about 8 months ago now. So I guess it was hard to strike that balance. And I think for me, as someone who I don't have direct reports at the moment, I have in the past, but also being in a team where I don't have direct reports, but I am hungry for that kind of next leadership opportunity. And even moving just from manager to senior manager, really kind of leading by example is probably how I would put it. And that's kind of what I really try to embody, and showing those qualities of like the type of leader that you see yourself as and you want to be before you're even a leader. So just in a team environment, being approachable, open to feedback, and there is like someone that can provide support to others, and showing that, I guess, strong work ethic. And when we did our pre-briefing, something that kind of came up between us panelists was that leading and acting the same when your boss is in the room as when your boss is outside of the room. So, not, I guess, showing that credibility as well. And, not just kind of when your boss is around being that good example and being that hard worker, but, being a leader, not a manager, but a leader, goes beyond that in terms of, what you do when people aren't watching as well. So, and they're the type of things that I guess I've really tried to incorporate into my journey and my work on a day-to-day basis. And it's exciting that I've been able to step up into that senior manager level and take on those new responsibilities and broaden responsibilities. But I'm kind of at that point now where I'm trying to figure out what does the next step look like for me and in my role. And I think I want to be more, I think like now that I've got that promotion that I was vying for, I'm like, okay, what am I aiming for? And I think my aim is to just really hone in on leading to the side, leading up and leading down. Like it's not just one way. And really focus on those leadership qualities, like just as a general employee, to really kind of, I guess, practice and show that I'm ready if and when those opportunities do arise. So I know personally I'm taking a lot from this conversation, so I'm sure our audience is as well. Tiani, on the back of my story, did you have a moment where you realized you were like already operating like a leader before you were then recognized as one?
Yeah, I think it was probably, like I said, when you're really going, you're kind of coming up with the solutions yourself before you're going to someone to ask what they may be, or you're going to them and saying, hey, I think we should do X, Y, and Z here because this is something that keeps occurring. So I think it's more trying to be a problem solver and looking at the wider business rather than just, your day to day.
Yeah, completely agree. I think having that awareness that there of other roles and other facets of the business, and also like we were talking about before, the stakeholders, and ultimately what is the priority of the business, and and all of those things that kind of come together, whether it's a board at a non-for-profit, but having that understanding and I guess awareness and factoring that into your day-to-day as well is super valuable. Scott, what do you want to see or hear from someone who doesn't yet hold a leadership title but is like clearly ready for more?
I'm very big on clarity of purpose and people that are able to articulate exactly what they want. I've held a view for a while that interview skills, and this is digressing slightly, but on topic, is a massive opportunity for new leaders or new people in an industry. Because I don't know, I can't talk for in terms of the past, but I think there's probably, most organizations will ask you a few things when they're trying to assess if you're ready to be a leader. Why do you want this role? Why this organization? And that's a massive opportunity for you to deliver the elevator speech as to why, how, the values of the organization align with your personal values. And if you're able to articulate, that's going to come off really well. They're also going to ask you they're going to ask you situational questions. So they're going to want examples of where you've done stuff, where you've achieved something, where you've come across a situation. I would implore everyone on this call, if you're kind of in the process of considering your first time leadership position, get a journal, use an AI tool, whatever it is these days, but document great things that you've done, but you will be doing it unbeknownst to you on a daily basis or weekly basis. And if you're able to come into an interview armed with clarity of purpose, why you want the role that you're applying for, as I said, have an understanding about the organization that you're applying for a role within, and able to link your personal vision for your career with that organization's, values. And then you're able to give them some really clear examples, real examples, a situation, what you did, what the outcome was. And as I said, it's really hard to come up with these things off the cuff. So if you've got a journal where you've got things and examples that are ready to go, you're instantly in the top 5% of people that are interviewing for this company. Because generally speaking, even at senior leadership positions within an organization, I rarely get this. So I think knowing exactly what you want, knowing exactly what type of organization, understanding their brand, their values, if you can articulate that, and if I see that in a person when I'm talking to them, extremely impressive. And as I said, if you can give an organization where you've achieved in the past in some clear examples that are real examples, it's going to put you in a really good position for the future.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And I think that's such a great tip if anyone takes anything away from today. And I know in the chat, there's already people commenting that they love this idea, and it's such a great way for them to be able to, use that in the future. So thanks for that, Scott. John, I'll come to you next. What mistakes do people make when trying to step up too early or in the wrong way?
Well, I think one mistake that I've observed is people suddenly try and become super visible. I'm in charge, and I'm involved in everything. I'm in control of everything, and suddenly that they try and act in a different way that demonstrates the seniority, but that's not necessarily building trust with their manager, the people above them, and also with their team. No need to talk more, no need to become very directive and barking orders at everybody just because you're trying to step up. It's about delivering outcomes, as I've said before. So being reliable, being dependable from your manager to yourself, being trustworthy, as Tiani said, trust is a huge thing. So real leadership, I don't think, is about what people are seeing. It's what, can they rely on you? Not what visibly impact you're making on the noise levels or, how often you're seen around the place. Owning results, building credibility, making your manager's life easier. I mean, in my former life, there's nothing better than when someone in my team, and I can think of a great person at RX, who said, I could do that for you, and let me do that. And suddenly your life's so much easier as the leader, but that person's demonstrated leadership and put together a project that, as Scott said, they can put in their case studies of where they've examples. So I think it happens naturally. You don't need to go to hell for leather on trying to show everyone. That's the mistake people make, I think.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Tiani, I'm keen to come to you on this one. I think it's a common kind of misconception that in order to like step up and continue progressing your career that you have to jump around, or you have to, don't spend more than 2 years at one organization. What for someone in that kind of in between stage who's ready to kind of take on that leadership role or more responsibility, direct reports, in your experience, like, is it better to move organizations chasing that, progressive role, or to, find an organization that nurtures leadership opportunities and with an aim to kind of grow internally?
I guess there's so many factors to consider when you'd be looking to, I guess, stay where you are or go somewhere else, which Scott kind of touched on, values aligning, so many things. But I think if you in terms of like your career progression, one thing I think is so important is to always kind of know, like, where do you want to be in the next, say, 2 to 3 years? Where do you see yourself going or doing, or what skills do you think you need to get? And I think it's really important that you communicate that to whoever it is in your business. It's your career, and I think you need to be able to voice exactly where you see yourself going. And I guess you'd have to then have that conversation and say, is that position even or that role even a possibility here? And if it is, kind of, what things do you think I would need to do to get there? And I think it's important to try to make those things as tangible as possible. You don't really want kind of fluff results because they're a little bit hard to work to. And if you could get some sort of timeline. So, where do I want to end up eventually? Is that available? And then what do I need to do to get there? And are you getting that support that you need to get there? And then I would, if you, like, personally, I've been at Moreton Hyphenelli 8 years now. So for me, it's worked better to go that route. But I've also had support to get me there. But I think when I was kind of saying I'm ready for the next step, like Scott said, I kind of went in with a bit of a portfolio of, these are the things I've done in the last 6 months, and that's why I think potentially I could be ready to go. And if there was things I needed to improve on, I really had those checklists, like KPIs that I was trying to hit. So I knew where I was going for, have the regular check-ins. And then I think it would just be really, you're just weighing up, like, what are my goals? Am I on track to achieve them in the role I'm in? And is the business helping me get to where I want to go? And I think if it's all yes, and all the other stars align, I personally would say it's good. It is good to grow internally in a business. Now, as a senior account manager, I've been in that coordinator's seat, so I know the struggles and the things that they have to go through every day. But in saying that, if there was nowhere else for me to go, it's, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to potentially change to a new job as well. But always have that open communication. So your employers, when you did come to them potentially and say, I'm, thinking of going here, that they're not shocked. Because I think if you don't voice what you want to do, or you don't know, it's quite hard as a manager to read the minds of your staff and know potentially who's happy where they are. So yeah, really hard one, but the 3 takeaways I'd say would be: know where you want to go, know how you have to get there, and just know if that business is going to help you get there or not.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that I can totally agree with what you're saying. I think that open communication between you and management, or your manager, your direct line manager, is super important to be able to have that relationship and that kind of rapport, to be able to have those conversations as well. And I think, taking a little bit from what Scott said, like, being able to document, I guess, your wins and how you are providing credibility and how you are showing that you're ready for that next step. is really good, because I guess you get to your, yearly appraisal or something, and you go to have that conversation and it's happening in real time, and you haven't even got across it. You're like, oh yeah, I know one time I helped such and such do this, but being able to say, yes, I did X and I did Y and I did Z, then they know that you are taking it seriously, but also there's no ambiguity around it either. So I think there's some really good kind of cross-pollination between these kind of like areas as well. And the comments that are in the chat saying that it depends on the company, completely agree, because smaller companies, larger companies, you might be in a company where maybe the culture towards that internal development, or it's like, oh, you have to be here 10 years before you get promoted. I think that's something for you to judge for yourself as well. And it goes back to what we were saying before about not underselling yourself and having that credibility. So if it's not a supportive environment to, that leadership development, making sure that you are kind of, I guess, not underselling yourself and doing yourself justice. And in the same regard as what you're saying, Tiani, being able to go forward and saying, this is where I see myself, and, maybe that conversation goes well or doesn't go well. I think if, you set your expectations and maybe it's not something that is doable, or maybe they say it is and then you wait and you crack on and it doesn't work out that way. I can personally, from experience, say that you need to get to a point where you kind of detach emotionally from the work that you do, because I think that we're all really passionate in the events industry, which is why we all work really hard. But there is a point where you have to kind of like, not undersell yourself and make sure that you look after you. So if you say that this is where you see yourself, and it's not something that's going to work at that organization, you got to stay true to yourself as well. So there's nothing wrong with that. We might wrap up quickly, because I note that we're getting towards our allocated 1 hour finishing up. I know that the comments from in the chat about Scott's advice, his real tangible kind of takeaways, I'd be keen to kind of like roll it out to the rest of the panel of, if there's one thing that someone can do today in their day-to-day life, or that they can take away, that one tip that you would give, that tangible takeaway, to help people demonstrate their leadership in the current day-to-day role without having that title. I'd love to hear what everyone has to say. So maybe John, we can head to you first.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is this is within our control. So my takeaway would be, if there's one thing you can do, is take ownership of a project or a task that's not within your standard role, follow it through, bring others on board, and deliver an outcome on that task. So something that's outside your day-to-day role. It could be improving a process, solving something that's been bugging the whole team for ages. It might be big, it might be small, but the first step is to take hold of something that's outside your role, and then deliver an outcome that everyone recognizes and you can be proud of.
Great. Completely agree there. Tiani, we might come to you. What's your thoughts? Is there something that you would take as top priority, top tip for someone to be able to take away and kind of start enacting today into their day-to-day?
Yeah, so I think exactly what John said, take on something and deliver an outcome. That's so important. And I would say, like, don't be scared to do it. I would say just have a crack and see how you go. And I think just like when you're having your day-to-day at work, show real like curiosity and be inquisitive about things that are going on. I think that's a super important thing to do.
Yeah, great. Love that. And Scott, we'll come to you as well. One takeaway that anyone from this audience today can, tangibly take away and start doing in their day-to-day to kind of show that they're ready for leadership.
Yeah, look, I think taking the time to write down what you believe are the stakeholders in your business. There'll be multiple, there always is multiple, and just have take some time to think about what those stakeholders need and want out of the day-to-day in your business. So your customer, what they need, the organization, your team, the community, if you go that far. I think having a really good understanding of that will help guide some of the decisions you make on the day-to-day. And as I said, stakeholder management is so important in leadership, and sometimes managing kind of conflicting needs of different stakeholders. So if you can really start thinking about it now, I think it's going to hold you in good stead.
Fantastic. Thank you. We're going to move on to some audience to take a few questions. There is one in the chat that we might start off with, which is about overstepping and finding that fine line between being proactive and being perceived as overstepping. So Tiani, I'm loving your kind of feedback in this area. Is this something you might have some thoughts on?
Yeah. I guess it really probably depends on what the scenario is. But I know with my team, I think they would have to really be doing, a lot of my job for me to think that they were overstepping. I think a lot of the time I feel like it should be taken as with the right intentions, which is that you're doing it because you want to help. I think if you are worried about overstepping, that's when I would just come with a few options of, is this possible? Or these are some ideas that I had, rather than maybe going gung-ho and saying, I've just taken this on and I hope you don't mind. That's easier said than done based on the organisation. We obviously have a fairly small team, so if someone grabs something and takes it on, that's fine to do. But I think you could also even just frame it to your manager and say, is this overstepping if I took this on, or would you be okay with that? And having those open conversations with them and just let them know why you're wanting to do it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Completely agree. And I think being able to have that open communication and line of communication with your manager is quite critical as well to, I guess your relationship with them, but also in order to be perceived in that, being proactive, but not trying to overstep or step outside of your particular role boundaries. Another question that has come through, which John, I think I might get your advice in on this one, just with recruitment background. The question is it a bad look to ask for a pay rise, even if it's justified?
It's not a bad look to ask for a pay rise. I think justified needs to be interpreted somewhat. I mean, I go back to the theme of many of the things I've said. It's really important to understand the value of what we deliver to our business and to be able to articulate that. So a pay rise is usually aligned to a level of responsibility and a level of delivery. And so I think it's really important to make sure that all emotion is taken away, and that if you are asking for a pay rise, it's in the right circumstances, in the right environment, and with a proper demonstration of the reasons why you believe it is justified. And usually that is because you're able to demonstrate the value of the work you do and the impact on your business of that work. There's no automatic pay rise, or just because you shout loudly doesn't mean it comes. So I think be very, as I say, detached and value driven in the way you present that discussion.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I know one piece of advice I received over the year was to, have some data. Have some data there to present, because I mean, you can't argue. You need to have evidence to kind of back up what you're saying. It's not like, oh, I did this because of this. But I guess if it's showing a conversion or, statistic, yes, or something like that, being able to have that tangible kind of data to show that you've gone away and like prepared for this as well is also really important.
Yes.
And I guess maybe touching on that a little bit more, if someone was vying for a promotion in a workplace, how would you see maybe that they are able to have those conversations with their manager? I think timing is probably a really good thing to touch on, like, you know, being conscious of not just what's going on in your life right now, but also, you know, if it's end of financial year or end of quarter, and your manager might have a lot of, you know, quarterly reports that they do, or, you know, it might be right before like a big project is being delivered, and maybe your role doesn't directly affect that, or it doesn't have those implications. But I guess being aware of, you know, what's going on in your manager's life and getting them at the right time, or maybe putting that open to them and saying, I'd really love to catch up with you one-on-one about my progression and how I'm doing. Is there a time that suits you, rather than, you know, maybe having your one-on-one and getting them out of the blue?
Do you want me to answer that one? Or?
I can see Scott nodding, actually.
Okay,
So,
Scott. Yeah,
so maybe we'll come to Scott.
Yeah, no, you're right. Timing is a thing. I think totally agree with what John just said. There's nothing wrong with asking for a promotion or a pay rise, as long as there's some basis. And I think, you know, if someone comes to you with a pay rise request out of the blue, that, you know, I'm not sure that carries as much weight as if it's something that's built towards. There are development opportunities taken, someone's building credibility, asking for more responsibility, taking on, as Tiani just said, taking on something and delivering on something outside of the scope of their role. If you've built that narrative over a piece of time, it's something that, you know, will absolutely, I think, will be looked upon favourably, at least explored, and you know, a senior leader might have a look at what's available and what can be done, knowing that this person probably deserves it. And then vice versa, the timing thing's important too, because, you know, for example, if three of the people, you know, you have two people in your team resign and then you immediately ask for a pay increase, just thinking, oh, you know, if you're opportunistic about it, versus it's something that you've built towards and you put some time and effort into, it'll be looked one of two ways. So I think, yeah, timing is important. Reading the room is important.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back to what you were saying before about like being like aware of the full picture as well. So, you know, that really, I think, is something to just kind of take across the board, really. We'll squeeze one more question in, and I might come to you again, Scott, on this one as well, just to hit you up one more time. So the question is, how do you tell or decipher the difference between someone who is like genuinely ready for that next step of leadership versus someone who just wants it and thinks that they're ready?
I think it comes down to the impact that they have on their team. You know, I think if you can see the positive impact they're having on their team members, if you see team members improve because they're on shift with someone, if you see, you know, and look, and you hear things, and you know who, if there's a preference, you know, as a senior line staff member, if there's genuine preference amongst their peers to work with them, if they feel comfortable working with them, and they've built that over a period of time, you definitely get a sense of someone being ready. And you know what? And I think that the outcome of that is when someone gets a promotion and their team are ecstatic and they celebrate because they know someone's deserved it, that's really telling. But I suppose that's an outcome. But yeah, as I said, I think if you look closely enough as a senior leader at team interactions, the success of shifts when that particular person is on, I think that goes a long way, and that will tell you a lot about a person and their readiness for the next level.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Did anybody, Tiani or John, did you want to add anything to that? So last question.
A thought is that it's very important if you get an opportunity to be at the table with people in roles above yours, is to conduct yourself and to contribute to a business conversation in a level that is shows a demonstration that you're a capable leader already. So there is that lead. It's been touched upon, but leading upwards and holding your own in a more senior environment is a real demonstration that you're ready, or you're almost ready to be sitting there in your own right.
Great, thank you. Okay, Tiani, did you want to add anything to that?
I think they've covered that fairly well. Yeah.
Cool. Great. All right. Well, I just would love to take a moment to reflect on a few of the key things that have come up today, just as we wrap up on the discussion. And, as we were just talking about, just kind of, I guess, taking those opportunities and being authentic and building your credibility over time, showing that proactivity, and really also kind of without overstepping. So just being conscious of, having that open communication and probably you're kind of channeling your efforts towards specific things that you think would be assisting your manager rather than like taking over their role. Understanding key stakeholders and outcomes of the business in general. And I think in general, that awareness of things outside of your role in particular as well. So other departments, other team members, things outside of work, just all of it is just having that context, I think is really useful across the board. And also not underselling yourself as well. So getting to that point of, getting that credibility, doing the hard yards, and just also knowing that when you are, maybe acting above your title, or, if you've been promised a promotion and it continues to be promised and maybe it's not coming there, just, being true to yourself and knowing your worth at the end of the day as well. So all really good, I think, tips that people can take away today. What's really kind of stood out is that leadership isn't something that begins with a title. It's something that's demonstrated well before it. It's how you show up, how you take ownership, how you build trust and contribute beyond your immediate role. For those of you who are still on that journey, hopefully today has reinforced that you don't need to wait for permission to start leading. A huge thank you to our panelists, John, Tiani, and Scott, for sharing your insights so openly and honestly. I think there's been a lot of practical advice and reassurance for everyone who's joining us today. And I can see the comments in the chat that people are writing notes and taking things away to enact as well, which is fantastic. So, and also a big thank you to everyone in the audience who has taken the time to be here, for your engagement and for contributing to the conversation. Before we finish up, I'd love to quickly share a few ways to stay connected with the Emerging Leaders Council. As you'll see on the screen now, we are a diverse and growing group, and we're currently looking to expand our representation, particularly across ACT, NT, and VIC. We're inviting expressions of interest until the end of April, with the aim of welcoming some new council members shortly after. If that's something you're interested in, you can scan the QR code that is on the screen now. Hannah's also going to pop some links in the chat, so you can click on them directly to get some more info. Reach out to any of us if you have any questions. We also have some exciting opportunities coming up to connect in person. We'll be hosting casual coffee catch-ups at 8 a.m. on Friday, the 17th of April across Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, and Hobart. It's a great way to meet others in the industry, so I'd encourage you to head to the ABIA website to register. That's just under the general event listings. And the QR code on the screen now is so you can join our LinkedIn group, where we post everything, all of the updates, and keep the conversation going there. We also are working on some stuff in the background to be able to have a little bit more of a one-stop shop for everything emerging leader, whether that's guides or resources, or also what's going on, what we're holding locally and online. So watch this space. We'd also love your feedback on today. We'll be sharing a recording of this webinar with all registered participants, along with a short survey link that will come out. You'll see a QR code on the screen for this right now. We really love your feedback as we look to build out this leadership-focused webinar series throughout the year. Your input will help shape the topics and conversation to come. For example, some of the things we're thinking might be the next step to chat about is going from that level of being a colleague to being someone's manager, and how do you navigate that, asking for feedback and going through those difficult conversations with your direct reports as well. So anyway, thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you all at a future Emerging Leaders Council event.